Because, maybe this is not something we can't accomplish ever. And maybe it's why it's so tragic and horrible. And I was going to just quickly show you what God says about abuse. We've already read this, but I want to read it to you. Because I want you to see in what stark terms God speaks. He says, when Jesus called the little child to him, he said unto them in their midst, and he said, surely I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom. And then in verse 4, therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this receives me. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and they were drowned in the depths of the sea. And in the group, y'all went on, and you saw that Jesus doesn't just leave it with millstones when he talks. I don't like to talk with hellfire and brimstone. I don't do it a lot, and Jesus doesn't do it a lot. He goes on and paints a stark picture of fiery torment for people who await children. And he's not really talking about abuse yet. He's talking about people who get in the way of a child and cause that child to lose track of their place in life. And if this is how he talks about that, what does he say about it? It's something that God is very upset and hurt about. For somebody who believes in this ongoing hell that never ends, and some Christians believe in that, that's terrifying. Now, I personally believe in a different view. I think I've mentioned this before, that's about God confronting someone with the consequences of their actions, and maybe they can learn and grow and be transformed to that. Something more, not forever. But whichever way you interpret Matthew 18, and Christians are on both sides of that, it's clear. The consequences of abuse in God's eyes are awful. He doesn't paint a pretty picture. For the person who done it, there is heartache and pain and anguish for it. So Jesus is very clear. God is not behind your abuse. God didn't support it. God isn't for it. God didn't send it your way. And you don't need to embrace it as a good thing. You don't have to do that. God is not supportive of abuse. When children are abused, God joins us in weeping with them as they weep. God's heart becomes broken. And if there's this hellfire language in Matthew 18, we have to know that God's anger also boils up. This is a holy anger that brings to love and change and transformation, not like mine. But his anger. His anger, as we are. But in Genesis, we are told it's not God's will, but yet it will happen. And I can understand what Trish is saying. If it's not God's will, why does it happen? It doesn't seem right. Abuse happens though it's not God's will, it's not God's choice. Just like, as I said, I don't think God wanted the Holocaust. I don't think God wanted Hiroshima. And how can this be? And the way I look at it is this is where that story of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the next slide, comes in. I got a picture of it here, we forget God, we always talk bad about the tree, right? Fruit. Because they ate it and they weren't supposed to, but we forget God made it. And God put it in the middle of the garden. And people understand Genesis differently, so take this, chew the meat, spit out the bones, okay? The way I understand this tree is to give it a conscience. We are different than the rocks and the trees and flowers and bees, right? They do what they do. They don't really have a lot of choice in that.
Open it for me.
You and I are given the gift of conscience. We have a sense of right and wrong. And I don't care how calloused you are, if you go and hurt someone, there's a part of you that knows it's wrong. And it might be a roar in the background of your mind, and it might be a whisper like that. You ever had the radio that's buzzing and it just won't shut up, But you have that sense of right and wrong. God giving us that gift involved also giving us the ability to choose. God created us to love each other and to love God. But love cannot be forced. Do you know what you call love that is forced?
Rape.
Yes, rape. Abuse. So to make us able to love God, we have to be able to hate God. To make us able to serve our neighbor, we have to be able to choose the opposite. And what's the opposite of service? It's using somebody. It's abusing somebody. Servitude, yeah. If God can pull strings and make somebody act loving and right and good, it's not loving. It's not right. It's not good. If you've ever had anybody do something for you that seemed so sweet, and later you found out somebody twisted their arm to do it, you know that doesn't feel the same. It's not the same. God knows that. So God created us when we have a choice. And my own personal belief is we say God is all powerful, but when God made you, God gave up some of his power and gave it to you. When God made Tiffany, he gave up some of his power and gave it to Tiffany. When God made people, God gave up some of his power and gave it to them. So that when it involves my choice, God can't stop me from choosing this or that. God cannot stop me from choosing the wrong path or the right. God can intervene and try to influence me and try to pull me aside and try to limit the consequences of what I do. But in making somebody who can love, God made someone who can hate. God's hands are tied on certain situations. And I don't feel that makes me happy, but that's how I interpret this story. So I don't think God necessarily can always stop abuse. And we don't often think about God not being able to. But if we can choose to serve and God can't stop us, we can choose to use and abuse each other. I don't think God could stop war, and if he could, he's not doing a particularly good job. Let's face it. I don't think God could stop slavery, not by a wave of the fingers. He did kind of stop it, but it took a while. And it took him convincing some people, and getting people to change their choices. And I don't think God necessarily could have stopped the Holocaust, because it involved people choosing to be evil. And this is why this talking about abuse is so challenging, because we don't want to think about that. But in all these circumstances I've described, if we look back, and I think Olivia was talking about this and Eliza a little bit, you can see something working to put the brakes on this thing that's gotten out of control. Voices being raised, speaking up against what is going on, both in the mouths of people and in the hearts of people. You can sense deep down it is wrong. When we talk about the call of God, you've ever heard us talk about that? I really believe we are talking about what God does in this situation. When God calls you to do something, God is calling you to be God's hands and feet and voice, through whom God answers these cries that God can't wave a magic wand and fix. I've had so many people I've talked to who've been through situations of abuse who could tell me about moments that, though they were getting the message, they were worthless the whole time. There was something in their life, in their heart, or a person who came alongside them and said, "You are worth more than this." Right? Where did that come from? That's the voice of God calling. And that's someone hearing the voice of God to be hands and feet in that broken situation. God helps us answer the cry in suffering that are the result of these choices. You and I are called to be a part of this solution to things like this. God answers those events that rip apart the fabric of our world and our hearts and our lives, and that's why we can't have an answer that ties it up in a nice little bow. God answers them through speaking to the hearts of people involved, calling them away from their hurtful acts, speaking in the hearts of others, asking them to intervene and stop. And again, a lot of the people I've known who've been through abuse, they can tell me occasions that you try to intervene and stop. in showing them the path to freedom from the cycle of abuse. God can't necessarily snap God's fingers and do away with this pain, but He chooses to become present in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of the pain, entering into it, holding our hands, calling us out in the way of darkness.
The second one is out of order.
I put that up there. Where is God? God can't snap God's finger and do away with it. But God chooses to become present in the midst of it, to hold our hands and show us the way out. And I had a verse that kind of demonstrates where God is. Jesus said this in his ministry. He said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because God has anointed me to preach the good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives, recovery to sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable day of the Lord." Where was God in your experience of abuse or in the experience of someone you know? Look into it. When did you or that person feel the Spirit's nearness when everything else was absent? When did they feel love embracing them unconditionally? Where did they hear good news and hope where everything was desperate? Where did they feel broken-heartedness begin to be healed? Where did they hear the call and promise that they could be set free from that cycle that held them captive? Where were their eyes open to the fact that they didn't have to live in that abuse as if it was normal? Where did you or they find the strength to get out of that situation? Where did you or they hear God's favor and acceptance? Wherever and whenever those break out in these situations of darkness, God is present. Whether it is through a dream at night, and I know people, that's where they heard they were loved, or through the kisses of a puppy dog. You might laugh at that. But I know people who were abused, that's the first place they felt unconditional love. A puppy dog in their lap that wouldn't hurt them. I can be loved without being hurt. Or the words of a friend, or the questioning of an angry atheist. Wherever you experience that call to freedom, self-acceptance, and letting go of the shame of abuse, God was there, pushing it forward. Before I get to my final point here, do any of you have a story about an experience of that, where maybe you had faced abuse, or know someone that had, and they began to get that sense that they were being called to God outside of them? It might have been your puppy dog kiss moment. I think you shared that your friend's imagination was where that happened for her.
And when she got older, she actually moved to another relative of hers, and that relative used her too, so she moved to a third relative, and she got some third relatives. They were just shocked with all she did, and they just loved her too, and like, she was working, she kind of lived with her parents, not her mom and her dad. I mean, they were just like actually it's two relatives, but she said that's her mom and dad now, and she had a great relationship with them. She would call and talk to them all the time. So like I said, I know when thinking back to that third relative that, took her away from us, so we got her out of that situation where we really, I guess, turn around there, see the face, and there's one, I am more than love.
So she had her imagination, she also had that other relative that showed her this is what love is not like. Anyone else have an experience?
This might be kind of silly, but a lot of people know that my neighbor has kind of verbally abused me at certain times. But it took a child in the neighborhood taking mail out of people's mailboxes and putting it in mine for him to say kind words to me. And I said, Lord, I can't believe this. I thought the world was going to be.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I can remember my abuse started when I was 4. So I was so little that I didn't know anything any better. So the first time that I got a pet of all my own, that it was all mine, that my pet could comfort me through anything that was wrong. And she was a black lab mix dog. And of all things, I named that dog Booger.